For the highlight of this assembly, we are going to have a very dear friend of mine, Roland Hall, a World War II veteran, come speak to us today. He proudly served this country in the 11th Airborne Division of the United States Army, and today he is accompanied here by his wife and his children. So I'd like to invite Roland Hall up to the stage to present to you how he feels about this wonderful land we live in.
This is a great honor for me to be asked to do this and share a few things about my life and about my feelings. I was born in 1926, and it's going to be difficult for me to pass on about 80 years of history here, you know, in 15 minutes. We'll give it a try. But when I was 15 years old, I was on my way one Sunday morning to attend a priesthood meeting, and we got word over the radio from a neighbor that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor in the Hawaiian Islands and bombed our ships that were tied up there in port, and also attacked the Philippine Islands. And 3 years later, as I was graduating from high school, I was called up to Fort Douglas, Utah for a pre-induction physical exam. And I signed up proudly with the Navy. When I was coming back in August for induction, they said, "Oh, the Navy's all full today, but you can have the Marine Corps." I had a cousin that had taken Marine Corps training, and he said it was mean and rough, and I didn't want any part of that. So I just said, well, I'll just stick with the Army. And while we were taking our Army training near Fort Worth, Texas, 17 weeks training, we marched out to the rifle range about 8 or 10 miles one day, and there's about 1,000 of us out there taking our rifle training. They had given us some instructions that was contained about 3 parts. One that says, listen closely to the things that matter most. Says, be steady in your position. Says, take a close aim on the sights, and then before you fire, you don't take, it says, hold your breath. Hold your breath while you pull the trigger, so you squeeze it gently and don't jerk. Okay, that served me well as we got on the rifle range. Why, we were told that if we could shoot a perfect score, we better ride back to camp instead of having to march back for that 8 miles in the captain's jeep. Out of 1,000 guys, there's 3 of us, I think, got a perfect score of 9 shots out of 9, about 300 yards. That's the length of 3 football fields end to end. And to get those bullseyes like that, we got to ride back to camp. We were sent overseas to the Pacific, and I just met a fellow this morning here that was on the same ship as I was, that went over in the Pacific and was also assigned to the 11th Airborne Division. We went over as infantry replacements, but they had a need there. When we landed on our first island there, before the assignment, we were in our tents there one night, and there was a Japanese Zero fighter plane came, swooped down upon us and strafed us with machine gun fire. It was kicking up the dirt at the heels of 1 or 2 guys that hadn't gone to bed yet. It was a little after 10. Next morning they were talking about it, and I thought they were pulling my leg about the attack. I slept right through it, didn't bother me a bit. Then we went up near Manila in the Philippine Islands on a different island, and that's where we were assigned as to the 11th Airborne Division. It was a bloody battle, and our troops, frontline troops, had suffered 75% casualties. There was only 2 men per squad left out of an 8-man squad. They assigned 4 of us greenies to those 2 seasoned men, and we went back to work in the mountains to clean up the rest of the resistance that was still left there. And I'd like to just mention one or two things. You know, things get scary sometimes and funny sometimes. We were moving forward up toward a position that had been encountered before by someone and met stiff resistance, and we stopped to wait a little bit there in kind of a clearing, and we heard a pop of some kind of a shell, and someone said, "That sounds like a mortar shell." If you don't know what a mortar is, it's like a piece of pipe, a little piece of pipe. It's about 18 inches to 2 feet long that you set it on the ground. You kind of point it the direction you hope it goes and drop a shell in, and it hits and explodes, lobs out over wherever you want to go and comes down and explodes. Now, this is a little bit like when a school's in desperation, you know, in a football game, and you've got your quarterback on the 50-yard line, and he throws a desperation Hail Mary pass, and it lobs up over and heads for the target on the goal line. Well, that's the way these mortar shells work. Well, when we heard that pop, then there was an explosion a short distance away, and those shells throw out scrap iron shrapnel in all directions. There was one piece of sharp shrapnel whizzed past in front of my face, and about 5 feet over hit one of my buddies right in the forehead, right between the eyebrows. And he felt something there, and he put his hand up to see what happened. And he said, "Ouch, that's hot." We looked over, and he had a piece of diamond-shaped scrap iron protruding out of his forehead. And one of the other guys there had a small pair of pliers. He went over and pulled them out, and pulled it out of his head and handed it to him. Says, "Here, do you want this as a souvenir?" And he says, "Well, not till it cools off." So anyway, that was just one incident. Now, it got a little more serious after that as we moved forward. I'd been assigned to carry a Browning automatic rifle, a BAR. It's a machine gun, hand-carried machine gun, weighs 21 pounds. And that was the heaviest artillery we had in our particular unit there. And as I moved forward on the main trail, I called it I-15, it came to a little ravine there that we had been paralleling it, and it cut across in front of us over to the mountainside. On the backside of that ravine, the Japanese had, at some hidden place, they had dug a tunnel back up along facing that, and every so far they would open up a little hole, just enough to maybe shoot a machine gun out of, and it was covered up with ferns and stuff like that. You couldn't see it. Well, just as I got to the edge, our trail dropped down in there, I knew that I was front and center, that I was right in the middle of things. About that time, a machine gun fire to my right erupted, and you've never heard so much machine gun fire in your life, and bullets flying everywhere. But they weren't any right next to me, but of course we hit the ground, and there was a little palm tree there about 7 inches in diameter. I took cover behind it and get all the protection I could, just laying on the ground. And when I'd hear a machine gun open up here, I'd scoot around a few inches, to try to be right behind it, and then I'd hear another machine gun, and I'd move a little bit back. And it was kind of interesting as well as very scary. But about that time, we had a couple of tanks come up alongside us, and our first sergeant and his bodyguard, a Navajo carrying a BAR, was the tank commander, and they started looking for these little window openings. And that Navajo, he had good eyesight. He said, "Yeah, there's one right over there." And they'd get a beat of it, and then the tank commander would give orders to his gunners in the tank, and they would put a 76 millimeter cannon shell right in that little opening at about 30, 40 yards away. Those guys were good, and there was an explosive shell in there. The machine gun fire all stopped. They didn't want to face the tank. And so the other people on our right, they scouted around and found the entrance to the tunnel. They had a case of dynamite along that they stuck in the entrance of the tunnel and set that off and sealed the tunnel up. mission accomplished. We turned and left. And then as we went on then, as time progressed, they pulled us back down out of the mountains into a valley place where they set up a parachute jump school for us 200 that had been assigned to that unit. Like I mentioned, one of those was in the audience here tonight. I just met him for the first time. But in that jump training, it was quite interesting there. And as we went up to the airplane, you may be able to see on the screen showing here, my son is showing some pictures of an airplane there with a bunch of soldiers. We would line up in groups of 12, a dozen, and 3 dozen would go on an airplane at once. When it was my turn to go out the door, I handed my little 620 box camera to a fellow that's still in the plane and said, stick this camera out through the porthole, and when I disappear out the door, I snap a picture. And he got a perfect shot of me. If you can see a line across, that's the tail of the airplane. Looks like it's going to cut me right in half. But I slid under it before the parachute opened. And so we were doing this, getting ready for the invasion of Japan. And when someone dropped a couple of friendly atomic bombs, the Japanese decided that they'd had enough and that they'd better quit. We boarded the airplanes immediately and headed for Tokyo. We found out later that our assignment was to parachute into Tokyo airport and capture the airport and clear it out so that our planes could land and bring in more troops and supplies to subdue the country. But since those atomic bombs had fallen, we were able to just fly in and land, and that was a lot more fun than being floating peacefully in a parachute up there in the air and have everybody on the ground shooting at you. And so we went in 2 days before the war was officially over, and we put a perimeter around the city of Tokyo so that the peace terms could be safely signed on the battleship Missouri out in Tokyo Bay. And so the Japanese military leaders were very cruel, and they had taught their soldiers to be cruel, and they told the people that we were cruel and that we just do all sorts of bad things. When the people found out that we were decent people, they got to where they weren't afraid of us, and I gained a lot of respect for the Japanese people. They were a lot like us. They were just hometown folks. They were hard workers, and they were family oriented, and sometimes they would go out of their way just to be friendly to us. We found out that the natives were friendly there. One day as we were on R&R, there's 3 girls there who wanted some of us to have a picture taken, and so they had me pose for them for the picture. Now you notice that I'm up above them. Now at that time in Japan, their women were second-class citizens. They could not vote. They were inferior to men in every way, and they absolutely refused to sit on the same level with me. They said, no, that is just not the way it's done. That's not the way we do it. And thank goodness things have changed now, where those people enjoy the freedoms that we have, and they've become one of our friendly nations. I was able to pick up a few souvenirs there to come home with. One thing I got was a Japanese army rifle and a samurai sword and an ancient rifle that's about 400 years old, an old muzzle loader that they don't even show in their antique books. It's so old. I was able to bring them home. Also, I was able to, they had some shops there, and I found a bolt of silk now that they wanted to sell. And of course, we couldn't import silk or anything during the war, and it was almost unknown here in the United States. But I had them unroll a bunch of that silk, and I sent it home to my mother. After I got home, a few years later, this silk was given back to me, and I gave it to my fiancée in Canada, and her mother made her a beautiful wedding dress out of it. After I guess after about 65 or 70 years later, I'll take a big jump here. In September of 2014, I was able to go on an honor flight, for a veterans honor flight, back to Washington, D.C. And we were able to go to the World War II Memorial and other historic sites there. One of the sites that we went to was Fort McHenry, where Francis Scott Key, when he was on board that British ship out in the Chesapeake Bay Harbor there, the British were firing their cannons at Fort McHenry, and they were trying to knock the flag down. And of course we had a beautiful rendition of that beautiful musical number that's a result of that. I had a distinct honor while I was there at Fort McHenry. We were there late in the afternoon, and they were retiring the colors, and I was able to help retrieve the colors and help to fold them up. Now, this flag is a huge flag. It was the same size, dimensions that the Patriots were flying over Fort McHenry that the British could not shoot down. And I have a great pride and swelling in my heart whenever I see the American flag and realize that it stands for peace and freedom, and that we need to be proud of it. We live in the greatest land in the world. I've sailed around, been around the world, and there's nothing compares to this country that we have here. We need to be proud of it and live the principles that will help us to maintain this freedom and to enjoy the protection that it gives us. The flag is a wonderful symbol of that, and I salute the flag and all of you who support it. I thank you. The Japanese women had the only dresses they had to wear at that time was the kimono, and so my daughter spent a year in Japan as a missionary, and she brought a kimono back, so she's my little Japanese kimono girl now.